This is author, speaker, and blogger Jackie Bledsoe, and this is Stephana, his wife of 14 years. They faced serious challenges during their relationship, like premarital parenthood and even homelessness. But they say through it all, they've learned lessons that have gotten them through tough times. In Jackie's new book, The 7 Rings of Marriage, he shares 7 keys to a long-lasting and prosperous relationship. Now, you start the book with words that I've heard a million times. Marriage is not what it used to be.
Yeah.
And you know, in America alone, 50% of marriages end in divorce. And I think the older I get, the more I know people who are actually getting divorced.
Yeah.
And when I ask them what happened, they always say, we just outgrew each other. What really does that mean, and what's really happening?
Yeah, I think when they say that, they haven't connected with their spouse. There's something that was missing, and that connection led them apart, and they didn't do the things that bring them closer together. So all the times there's a disconnect in our marriage, but we have to proactively and intentionally work to come closer together and ultimately come closer to God together.
And so it's being intentional.
Yes.
Now, in the book, you mentioned 7 rings or 7 stages that you say every couple goes through at some point in their marriage, and it begins with the engagement ring. And one thing that really stood out to me with that in the book is that how candid you are about some of the mistakes that the two of you made during that stage. What do you know today that you wish you had known during the engagement ring stage?
Yeah, definitely. I wish that I would have known what we did before marriage, how that would impact our marriage. And it had a really big impact on our marriage. We didn't do it the way we teach couples to do it now. So we were intimate before we were married. That resulted in our child, which we're so thankful of, our daughter. But it also brought about a bunch of challenges, and we didn't get a chance to connect in our marriage. So we came into the marriage as parents and newlyweds, and all that just kind of smashed together at one point.
One of my favorite chapters is about preserving your marriage. And I've heard so many people, we're talking about all of these phrases, but I always hear people say marriage is hard work. Now, my first thought is being single is hard work. Whatever it is, it's hard work. But why is marriage such hard work?
I think we come into marriage with different ideals on what it's going to look like, especially if you don't seek out counseling ahead of time. So you have this idea, this picture in your mind of how it's going to function. And then when it doesn't function that way, obviously your spouse has an idea too on how it should work. And when you come together without having talked through that or having someone else give us a plan, a guide for what it's going to look like, there's friction. There's, I want it to be this way and he thinks it should be that way. And so you just kind of butt heads.
You know, I thought it was really interesting that you wrote the book. And men, there's so many bad things said about men when it comes to family and marriage, or I've heard a lot of bad things. So I want to set the record straight. What is the one most important thing to a man when it comes to marriage and his family?
Number one is keeping his family together. But the way to do that is to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And without that, we would not be here right now. We know there were so many challenges that took many other couples out. But when all else failed, there was one thing that we always agreed on, and that was Jesus was first. And I think that's the one thing that, as a man, if you get that foundation, then no matter what goes on, no matter how many times we disagree, we know that we were coming back to the same point at some period of time.
Yeah, and one thing your husband talks about in the book. I laughed at this part. He talked about, we're talking about being a man in the family. He talked about being domestic sexy. And I thought that was so interesting because for him, that means helping you out with something around the house, just so it's one less thing you have to do.
Absolutely.
So I think there's a little hint in that for the men who are watching. What really does that mean to you as a woman and a wife when your husband comes in and takes that role?
I think more than anything, it means he cares. He sees me, he sees what's on my plate, and he wants to lighten the burden for me. So that is my love language, and when he speaks it, it is absolutely sexy.
And one other thing in that same path you talk about in the book is, the phrase marriage is not for me. And most people say that to say, I just don't want to get married. It's not like people say college isn't for everybody or marriage isn't for me. It's not something I should do. But you have a different perspective on what that means.
Yeah, marriage is not for you means marriage is not about your selfish motives and your intentions, but marriage is about serving your spouse. Marriage is about the children that will come from your union. Marriage is about your in-laws, your friends, all the people that will be impacted by your marriage union. That's who it's about. When we go in with that mindset versus I'm going in to get this need met, said I'm going to meet this need and I'm going to do these things to serve, then that changes the game in our marriage. But when we go in with it thinking about it's us, we're heading down a bad road.
Throughout the book in various chapters, I found one common thread. You talk a lot about prayer. Can both of you tell us the difference prayer has made in your marriage?
Yeah, one, it is the most intimate thing that you can do with another person. So that prayer enhances all aspects of our lives. And it just surrenders us to Christ. We can't do it on our own. And without his guidance, without his word in us and us acting upon that, we'd probably be on here talking a different story.
I think it just is the closest that you can get. It breaks down barriers. There are times where we've been in a disagreement that it's hard to stay angry with someone when you're going to the Lord together. Yeah. So it exposes to me what he needs covered in prayer. It allows me to share with the Lord what I'm struggling with him or with whatever is going on, and it gives him a place to cover me and vice versa in whatever we're needing to talk to the Lord about. So.
Yeah. And I want to add one thing, and God will hear and answer those prayers. He has shown up time and time again for our prayers. It might not look exactly what we thought, but he shows up every time we pray, and we learn now to start to document that. So we want to share, and I think I encourage couples, start a prayer journal, document what God does so you can actually see it and remember it, share it to your kids.
Yeah.